Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now. The Cleveland Browns organization is imploding from within, and what we're witnessing isn't just bad coaching decisions or questionable play calling. This is something far more sinister, far more calculated, and far more damaging to what could be one of the brightest young quarterback talents the NFL has seen in years. Skip Bayless, never one to mince words or play the political correctness game that dominates modern sports media, has unleashed an absolutely blistering takedown of Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski that's sending shockwaves through the football world. This isn't your typical hot take or manufactured controversy designed to generate clicks. This is a veteran sports analyst with decades of experience calling out what he sees as deliberate, systematic sabotage of a young quarterback who has done nothing but exceed expectations at every turn. The controversy centers around the Browns' heartbreaking loss to the Tennessee Titans, where despite a heroic performance from fifth-round pick Shedeur, Cleveland fell short by the narrowest of margins in a game that should have gone to overtime. The final score read Tennessee 31, Cleveland 29. But those numbers don't begin to tell the story of what transpired on that field and what it reveals about the toxic dynamic between a head coach and his quarterback. Bayless isn't just upset about a loss. He's not simply frustrated with poor execution or bad breaks. He's identifying a pattern of behavior from Stefanski that suggests something far more troubling is happening in Cleveland. Something that could derail the career of a quarterback who has shown flashes of genuine franchise player potential. Let's establish the context that has Bayless so fired up, because the numbers from this game are absolutely staggering and paint a picture that's impossible to ignore if you care about honest evaluation of quarterback play. Shedeur, the fifth-round selection that many analysts and scouts believed was overdrafted given his pedigree and the baggage that comes with being Deion Sanders' son, put together a performance that would make veteran quarterbacks jealous. 364 passing yards, 3 touchdown passes, multiple clutch conversions on third down, leadership in the huddle that had his teammates believing they could win despite falling behind early. And here's the kicker that really drives home just how special this performance was in context. Sanders also led the team in rushing yards, capping off his dual threat display with a 7-yard touchdown run that showcased athleticism and field awareness that scouts supposedly questioned coming out of Colorado. Now let's contrast that with the performance of Cam Ward, the Golden Boy, the #1 overall pick in the draft, the quarterback who was supposed to be the safest, surest, most NFL-ready prospect in the entire class. Ward completed just 14 of 28 passes for a measly 117 yards. Read those numbers again and let them sink in. 14 completions out of 28 attempts is a completion percentage that wouldn't be acceptable in many college programs, let alone for the first overall pick in the NFL draft facing the same competition that Sanders was carving up. Sure, Ward threw a couple of touchdown passes, but when you dig into the tape and examine the context of those scores, they were largely the result of excellent play calling, superior talent around him, and defensive breakdowns rather than Ward elevating his game or making the kind of throws that define franchise quarterbacks. This wasn't just a case of one quarterback having a better day than another. This was a complete and total demolition in terms of quarterback play. Sanders didn't just outplay Ward, he absolutely embarrassed him in every measurable category that matters when evaluating the position. Yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, decision-making under pressure, ability to extend plays, leadership in crucial moments. Sanders won every single one of these comparisons, and it wasn't particularly close. Yet somehow, despite this dominant performance, despite proving once again that he belongs not just in the NFL but among the elite young quarterbacks in the league, Sanders and the Browns walked away with a loss. How does that happen? How does a quarterback put up those kinds of numbers, play that well, and still end up on the losing side? The answer, according to Bayless, lies in one critical moment that encapsulates everything wrong with the Browns organization and Kevin Stefanski's approach to handling Sanders. Picture the scene. The Browns have just completed a breathtaking 80-yard touchdown drive in just 7 plays. Sanders was surgical during this possession, picking apart the Tennessee defense with the precision of a veteran quarterback who had been studying this opponent for years. Every throw was on target. Every decision was correct. Every read was made pre-snap with the kind of processing speed that separates good quarterbacks from great ones. The drive culminated in a thing of beauty, a perfectly thrown fade route to the corner of the end zone where only his receiver could make a play on the football. Touchdown Browns. The score is now 31-23. The momentum has completely swung. The crowd, which had been restless and frustrated for much of the afternoon, suddenly believes again. This is where things get interesting, and by interesting, I mean absolutely infuriating if you're a Browns fan or anyone who cares about seeing young talent properly developed. The Browns need a 2-point conversion to make it a 1-score game and give themselves a legitimate chance to tie things up with another score. Conventional wisdom, basic football logic, and simple pattern recognition all point to the same obvious conclusion. You put the ball in your quarterback's hands. You let the guy who just led an 80-yard touchdown drive and has been your best offensive player all afternoon make the play. You trust the process that got you to this point. You ride the hot hand. Kevin Stefanski did none of these things. Instead, in what Bayless characterizes as an act of pure ego-driven sabotage, Stefanski removed Sanders from the field entirely and went with a wildcat formation featuring running back Austin Judkins taking the direct snap. Now, wildcat formations can work in specific situations when you've practiced them extensively, when the defense doesn't expect them, when you have the right personnel matchups to exploit. This was none of those situations. According to multiple reports and Bayless's own sources within the organization, this wildcat package had barely been practiced. The players weren't entirely sure of their assignments. The timing wasn't there. The execution was predictably disastrous. Judkins took the snap and was supposed to pitch the ball back to another player who would attempt a pass into the end zone. Except Judkins either forgot this was the play call, got confused by the defensive alignment he was seeing, or simply wasn't properly coached on his responsibility in this situation. Instead of executing the designed play, he took off running straight ahead into a wall of Tennessee defenders who knew exactly what was coming because there was no deception, no misdirection, no element of surprise whatsoever. The 2-point conversion failed miserably. The Browns would not get the ball back in any meaningful way. The game was essentially over at that moment. And Sanders, the quarterback who had given everything he had to put his team in position to win, had to stand on the sideline watching helplessly as his coach's decision cost them any realistic chance at victory. Bayless describes this moment as Sanders performing what he calls the trot of shame, walking off the field with his helmet in his hand, knowing that he'd done everything asked of him and more, yet it still wasn't enough because the person making the decisions didn't trust him in the biggest moment of the game. Try to imagine the psychological impact of that sequence if you're Sanders. You've just played the game of your young NFL career against a defense that had no answers for what you were doing. You've proven in the most concrete way possible that you deserve to be on the field. You've earned the trust and respect of your teammates who have seen you lead them back from deficits multiple times. And then, in the moment that matters most, your head coach essentially tells you through his actions that he doesn't believe in you, that he'd rather try a gimmick play the team hasn't properly practiced than put the ball in your hands. This is where Bayless's argument moves from criticism of a single bad decision into something much more serious and systemic. He's not just saying Stefanski made a mistake in the heat of the moment. He's arguing that this decision is part of a larger pattern of behavior that reveals Stefanski's true feelings about Sanders and exposes what Bayless characterizes as deliberate sabotage of the young quarterback's development and success. According to this theory, Stefanski never wanted Sanders in the first place. The coach didn't advocate for drafting him in the first round, didn't push for him in the second round, and wasn't enthusiastic even about the fifth-round selection that eventually brought Sanders to Cleveland. Why would a head coach, especially one with an offensive background who's supposed to be a quarterback guru, not want a talented young signal caller? The answer, Bayless suggests, is pure ego. Kevin Stefanski's reputation is built on being an offensive mastermind, someone who understands quarterback play at the highest level and knows how to evaluate and develop talent at the position. If Sanders, a fifth-round pick who wasn't supposed to be anything more than a developmental project or clipboard holder for a few years, turns out to be the answer at quarterback, what does that say about Stefanski's evaluation skills? What does it say about all the other quarterback decisions the Browns have made under his leadership? What does it say about the massive contract given to Deshaun Watson, a move that has turned into one of the worst personnel decisions in recent NFL history? Admitting that Sanders is the guy means admitting that Stefanski's quarterback judgment has been catastrophically wrong, and his ego simply cannot handle that reality. So instead of embracing the gift that has fallen into his lap, instead of recognizing that sometimes the best players come from unexpected places, and there's no shame in being pleasantly surprised by a fifth-round pick exceeding expectations, Stefanski is actively working to undermine Sanders at every opportunity. It's not enough to just ride the hot hand when Sanders is playing well. It's not enough to gradually increase his role as he proves himself. According to Bayless's reading of the situation, Stefanski is looking for opportunities to take the ball out of Sanders' hands, to call plays that minimize his impact, to make decisions that ensure if the Browns succeed, it won't be primarily because of Sanders' heroics. The Wildcat call on the two-point conversion becomes, in this context, not just a bad decision, but a revealing one. It wasn't about giving the Browns the best chance to tie the game. It was about Stefanski protecting his ego and his reputation. If Sanders had been on the field and successfully converted that two-point attempt, the narrative coming out of the game would have been all about the fifth-round quarterback willing his team back into contention and nearly pulling off an incredible comeback. Stefanski would have had to stand at the podium during his press conference and answer question after question about Sanders, about how wrong the pre-draft evaluations were, about whether this changes the quarterback hierarchy in Cleveland, about what it means for the team's future direction. By calling the Wildcat play, Stefanski ensured that even if the two-point conversion had somehow worked, he could claim credit for a clever play call rather than having to give Sanders all the glory. This pattern of undermining young quarterbacks isn't new for Stefanski, according to Bayless's analysis. He points to the Baker Mayfield era as evidence of similar behavior. Mayfield, the first overall pick in 2018 who showed flashes of genuine franchise quarterback potential, never seemed to get full support from Stefanski. There was always criticism, always second-guessing, always a sense that Stefanski was looking for reasons why Mayfield wasn't the long-term answer, rather than ways to maximize his considerable talents and build an offense around his strengths. Mayfield eventually left Cleveland and found success elsewhere, leading the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the playoffs and proving that with proper coaching and a system that suited his skill set, he could be a winning quarterback at the NFL level. Now history appears to be repeating itself with Sanders. Except this time the stakes are even higher because Sanders is performing at an even higher level than Mayfield ever did in Cleveland. The comparison to Mayfield is instructive because it suggests this isn't about any particular quarterback or any specific situation. This is about Stefanski's fundamental approach to the position and his inability or unwillingness to fully commit to young quarterbacks, especially ones who weren't his choice or who threaten his status as the offensive mastermind by succeeding without needing extensive coaching and development. Let's examine that 80-yard touchdown drive more closely, because it deserves to be appreciated as the masterpiece of quarterbacking that it was, and because it makes the subsequent Wildcat decision even more baffling and indefensible. 7 plays to go 80 yards. Sanders completed pass after pass, moving the chains methodically, never forcing anything, always taking what the defense gave him, but also showing the courage to push the ball downfield when opportunities presented themselves. The drive was a perfect blend of patience and aggression, of managing the game situation while also making explosive plays when needed. On 2nd and goal from the 7-yard line, facing a Tennessee defense that knew a pass was coming and had everyone available to defend the end zone, Sanders dropped back and delivered an absolute rainbow of a throw. The fade route to Cedric Tillman in the corner of the end zone required perfect ball placement, perfect timing, perfect touch on the football to get it over the defender, but low enough that his receiver could high-point it and come down with both feet inbounds. Sanders executed it flawlessly. This wasn't a check down that turned into something big because of yards after catch. This wasn't a broken play where he scrambled around and found someone wide open. This was a professional grade throw to a tightly covered receiver in the most important area of the field. This was the kind of throw that franchise quarterbacks make, the kind of play that defines careers. After that drive, after that throw, after that performance through 3.5 quarters, how could any rational coach not trust Sanders with a simple 2-point conversion? Even if you want to have a couple of different plays available depending on the defensive look. Surely Sanders executing a play from under center or out of the shotgun gives you a better chance than taking him off the field entirely and running a wildcat play you haven't properly practiced. The decision makes no sense from a football perspective, which is exactly why Bayless believes it must be explained by other factors, namely Stefanski's ego and his need to prove that Sanders isn't the answer. The defensive performance certainly didn't help matters, and Bayless acknowledges this even as he focuses primarily on the offensive sabotage. 184 rushing yards allowed to a Tennessee Titans team that came into the game with a 1-11 record and had shown virtually nothing on offense for the entire season. The Browns were 4.5-point favorites at home, meaning Vegas expected them to win comfortably. This was supposed to be a get-right game, an opportunity to build momentum heading into the final stretch of the season, a chance to get Sanders more experience in a relatively low-pressure environment against an overmatched opponent. Instead, the defense got pushed around by a team that had been pushed around by everyone else, and the offense, despite Sanders' heroics, couldn't quite overcome the hole they'd been put in. The game started disastrously, setting a tone that the Browns would spend the rest of the afternoon trying to overcome. The opening kickoff featured a coverage breakdown that was almost comical in its ineptitude, with the Titans returner finding a massive hole and taking it all the way to the 15-yard line. First play from scrimmage for Cleveland, they handed the ball to Judkins, who somehow managed to lose 4 yards, despite there being no defenders in the backfield when he got the ball. Second down, a 3-yard run that accomplished nothing. 3rd and 11, and both edge rushers came free because nobody blocked them, resulting in Sanders getting sacked with nowhere to go and no chance to make a play. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the Browns committed a false start penalty as they lined up to punt, backing them up to 4th and 18 from their own 7-yard line. You could feel the disaster coming before it happened. You just knew something catastrophic was about to occur, and sure enough, before most fans had even settled into their seats, Tennessee was up 7-0. Shortly after, it was 14-3, and Sanders was playing from behind the entire game, trying to overcome not just the Tennessee defense but also his own team's mistakes and coaching malpractice. The tragedy, and Bayless emphasizes this point repeatedly, is that despite all these obstacles, despite his defense giving up huge rushing yards, despite special teams breakdowns, despite questionable coaching decisions throughout the game, Sanders nearly pulled it off. He nearly willed this team to victory through sheer force of talent and determination. That's what makes the Wildcat decision so unforgivable. Sanders had earned the right to win or lose that game with the ball in his hands. He'd proven over 4 quarters that he was the best player on the field and the Browns' only real chance at victory. To take that opportunity away from him in the crucial moment wasn't just bad coaching. It was, as Bayless argues, sabotage. The comparison to Cam Ward deserves deeper examination because it cuts to the heart of one of Bayless's most controversial claims, that Sanders is not just good, but actually better than the first overall pick in the draft. This is a bold statement given how the pre-draft process played out and how much consensus there was among scouts, analysts, and general managers that Ward was the safest, most pro-ready quarterback prospect in the class. Ward had the pedigree, the production in college, the physical tools, and the intangible qualities that teams covet. Sanders, meanwhile, dealt with questions about his arm strength, his tendency to hold the ball too long, his decision-making under pressure, and the baggage of being Deion Sanders' son and whether that family dynamic would translate well to the NFL. Yet, here we are, just a portion of the way through their rookie seasons, and the results are stark. Sanders is playing at a legitimacy high level, while Ward has struggled with consistency and hasn't come close to justifying his draft position through his on-field performance. The head-to-head matchup in this Titans-Browns game was supposed to be an opportunity for Ward to show why he went first overall and Sanders went in the 5th round. Instead, Sanders completely and thoroughly outclassed him in every meaningful way. It wasn't just the counting stats, though those were damning enough. It was the way Sanders played, the confidence he showed, the throws he made, the way he commanded the offense and had his teammates believing they could win despite the odds. Ward, by contrast, looked lost at times, unsure of his reads, late with his decision-making, and unable to generate anything consistently through the air. His 117 yards on 28 attempts is the kind of performance that gets backup quarterbacks benched. For the first overall pick to put up those numbers while Sanders is throwing for 364 yards and 3 touchdowns is a damning indictment of the entire pre-draft evaluation process and should force teams to reconsider how they scout quarterbacks and what qualities they prioritize. Bayless doesn't just argue that Sanders is better than Ward currently. He makes the more provocative claim that Tennessee, the team that selected Ward first overall and the team that ironically just beat the Browns, is going to rue the day they didn't take Sanders instead. This is the kind of take that will either make Bayless look like a genius in 5 years or like someone who got caught up in a small sample size and let recency bias cloud his judgment. But based on what we've seen so far, it's not as crazy as it might initially sound. Sanders has shown qualities that simply can't be taught and that often separate good quarterbacks from great ones. He has legitimate mobility despite narratives suggesting he was a pocket passer who couldn't create outside structure. The 7-yard touchdown run he had in this game was proof of his athletic ability, but it goes beyond just one play. When you watch Sanders on tape, you see a quarterback who can extend plays with his legs, who can slide in the pocket to avoid pressure, who can escape when protection breaks down, and still deliver accurate throws downfield. These aren't just nice complementary skills. In the modern NFL, quarterback mobility is essential, and Sanders has more of it than he gets credit for.